Because at the end of the day, it's the biggest transaction of your life. A lot of people really don't understand that the need for a buyer's agent. And believe it or not, up until the past, decade or so, using a buyer's agent wasn't even all that common. So I can certainly understand why a lot of people, folks who were buying homes in previous decades aren't used to the idea of working with a buyer's agent. It's something that didn't necessarily happen. The listing agent listed the house, buyers came to that listing agent to write an offer. And that's kind of the way it was for a really long time. But in recent years, I think the development of using and working with a buyer's agent has come about because there's a real benefit. A buyer's agent is going to represent the buyer's interests over and above the seller's interests, right? So that's the biggest reason that you would want to work with a buyer's agent. You want someone representing your interests. When it comes to price, of course, you want someone negotiating for the very best possible price that you can get, but it's also super important throughout the entire process of buying a home to have someone representing your best interests when it comes to removing contingencies from your contract, when it comes to working on timelines that best work for you as the buyer versus the timelines that might be best for the seller, someone negotiating those on your behalf. And I think one of the biggest places that a buyer's agent can be most helpful to you is in negotiating repairs that might be needed on the property, or sometimes even, a financial arrangement in lieu of repairs. Because a buyer's agent isn't going to know the history of the property, but they're going to be holding your hand throughout the process of home inspection and helping you come up with an idea for what these repairs are going to cost and exactly how to work at the angle to best get the repairs done by the sellers. Whereas someone representing the sellers might definitely would take a different approach. So that the benefit of using a buyer's agent is really to have someone in your corner who's representing your best interests. Believe it or not, I field phone calls all the time from folks who assume that they should be working with the listing agent or assume that they're going to get a deal by working with the listing agent. There are some negatives to a buyer deciding to work with the property's listing agent. First and foremost is representation, no matter what, no matter when you come to the table. If you come to the table the first day that the house is on the market as a buyer, there is already an existing relationship between the seller and their agent. Even if they signed those papers yesterday, even if they met yesterday to get that property on the market, there is some relationship that already exists prior to your relationship. I think it's really difficult as part of human nature for you to represent someone and then sort of play the foil to yourself and represent someone on the opposite side. If one party wants, the purchase price to be $300,000 and the other party wants to pay $290,000, helping both sides negotiate what that can look like can be done, but you will never really know as a buyer if your interests were represented at the fullest capacity that they could have been if you work with a listing agent. This listing agent is always going to be protecting the seller's interest first because they haven't met you yet, right? So they're always first protecting the seller's interest. I haven't seen it done well where they represent both sides. A lot of folks say that they want to work with the listing agent out of a belief that they have that they would be saving money. And while I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, I'm sure that it does. I would ask for proof of that as a buyer. You see, the listing agent signs an agreement with the seller of the home that includes the commission. And that commission agreement is determined before the property is even placed on the market. How much that listing agent is going to be paid is in the listing contract with the seller. What's also in the listing contract with the seller is how much the buyer's agent is going to be paid. You see, the seller signs a contract with their listing agent, and that listing agent writes into the contract how much of their commission they are willing to share with the buyer's agent who brings them a buyer. That's how the process works. Essentially, the seller hires a listing agent, and the listing agent says, I will agree to share X number of dollars or X percentage of the purchase price with the agent who brings us a buyer. And all of that is laid out in the contract before the house is ever even placed onto the market. So assuming going in that if you work with the listing agent, you're going to pay less for the property isn't necessarily true. All of that is laid out with the seller before the property ever even goes on the market. So if you decide that you do want to work with a listing agent, or you end up in a conversation with the listing agent, that's the first thing I would ask. If you do end up under contract with the listing agent representing you, I would want to see the commission agreement between the seller and the listing agent. That's something that the buyer isn't normally privy to. And so as a buyer who is also being represented by the listing agent, I would want to see what that commission agreement looks like, so that you know that you are saving money. If that was the agreement going in, was that you were going to save money by using the listing agent, I would want to know exactly what I was saving by doing that. I don't think anyone really asks that question very often. And so you go into this agreement with someone who is maybe not necessarily representing your best interest as well as an independent agent would, under the guise that you are going to be saving money by doing so, but do you really know that you are saving money? I have learned from experience from buyers who have gone through this process before, and in hindsight, in retrospect, told me it was the worst thing they'd ever done. They felt like they were never represented well. They felt like the sellers got the fair shake and they didn't. All I can say is learn from the mistakes of those who have done it before you. Ask people who have gone through this process before, and 9 times out of 10, they're gonna tell you they wish they'd worked with an independent agent who was representing their interest. Because at the end of the day, it's the biggest transaction of your life, probably, and you wanna have somebody in your court, in your corner, that's representing you and your needs over and above those of the seller. For more information and content like this, make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel.